Guys, this is Fight Commentary Breakdowns, and we got a very special guest. You've actually seen him on Martial Arts Journey, and I reached out to him because I want to hear more about his story. So this is Patrick, Instructor Patrick or Coach Patrick from Effective Martial Arts. And since you guys have heard his talk, and if you haven't, go on Ruckus's channel to really hear his talk, we wanted to focus on other areas today. And Patrick, because he's MMA guy who's also done a lot of Kung Fu training, we want to do a little talk about Wing Chun. So, dude, Patrick, welcome. It's an honor to have you.
Jerry, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the channel. Congrats on your channel, by the way. Awesome content, a lot of breakdowns and a lot of valuable info for your viewers. I know people are interested to see kind of what works, what doesn't, and why it's so. And I'm really excited to talk about my insights, which I think are somewhat unique in the sense that I did transition from different systems. So looking forward to getting into it, and hopefully viewers can get some value out of this.
Absolutely. Now, Patrick, before we talk about Wing Chun, I have to ask you, are you from Canada?
I am indeed, yeah. Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Okay, because you talk like Dave LeDuc. That's why I was like, you must be from that area.
Yeah? You feel a little bit of an accent?
Yeah, a slight, really cool French accent, like a Quebec French
accent. Je parle
accent.
français aussi, right? Parle français ici aussi. On est bilingue.
Wow.
So speak French and English.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so now we know you're a French Canadian.
Yeah.
You're probably the second French Canadian because Dave LeDuc was the first French Canadian we interviewed. So it's awesome. We have our second French Canadian.
There we go. Same city as Georges St. Pierre.
Oh, that's why you talk like him too. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we had this talk, Patrick sent me a lot of notes, and he really thought about, okay, Wing Chun, Kung Fu, etc. So, Patrick, tell me more about your journey with Wing Chun. How did you get into it? How long did you train it, etc.?
Exactly. Okay, so yeah, with pleasure. Essentially, to give you a little background of my story, well, I went more into detail on different aspects of it, like you said, on the Martial Arts Journey channel with Ruckus, and I also did another talk on my channel entitled Why I Quit Kung Fu, and I go in detail on the reasons why I made that transition. But essentially, I practiced Wing Chun Kung Fu for about 10 years straight. But like really intense. Like I didn't do it like as a tourist or a casual practitioner. Like I was doing this as my thing. Like I was really invested, and I really wanted it to work. Like I got into it, and like many martial arts, you know, you're kind of charmed by the promise of the style, and you want to believe in it. And once you make that decision, you want to just go further down that path and really try to make it work. And that's what happened to me. Eventually, I came out of it, and I go into detail on the Martial Arts Journey channel about that, because I did realize that, unfortunately, the organization I was part of was kind of cultish. There was a lot of abuses in this situation, and power imbalances, and somewhat exploitation of students by the master. So that's something you don't see coming. As a young student, a young man getting into this school, I wanted to believe that the organization was healthy and that had its students' best interests in mind. But unfortunately, a series of circumstances made me realize that that wasn't the case. And that's when I decided to split from the mother organization and from my former Kung Fu teacher. And at that point, that's when I started to question everything. Because it's kind of like your whole frame starts crumbling, or the whole thing starts unraveling, and then you start to see it from a different perspective, and you start to see, wait, like, okay, well, this was, by the way, can we swear?
Yeah.
So this was bullshit. This was not right. And so if that methodology or that way of doing things wasn't correct, well, what about the techniques? What about the practice methodology? So that's when I started to question everything and look at it from a very different angle, and look at it basically objectively, like the challenge fights that you cover so well on your channel, where Kung Fu people, Wing Chun people, more often than not, they get pummeled, right? They get taken down and grounded and pounded and even like jabbed, and they really, in my experience, it hasn't really been, Kung Fu and Wing Chun haven't really been represented successfully in mixed martial arts competitions since like the early 90s. And that made me want to learn other stuff, which was a huge blessing. And eventually, when I got into it, I saw, okay, so you got your jiu-jitsu, you got your wrestling, you got your boxing, you got your Muay Thai. So I was doing a little bit of all that. But at that point, I already had a school.
Mhm.
right? I already have a Kung Fu school, and I saw that, okay, my students want to learn something that's simple, they can absorb, that they can do for like 2 classes a week, right? The average student, amateur, doesn't train every day, or much less 2 times a day. So that was the inspiration behind creating my channel, and then the curriculum that we teach now at our school, which is essentially a belt system for MMA.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a curriculum that encompasses striking, wrestling, and grappling in a very structured format, starting with the basics. So we acquire the strength and conditioning, the body mechanics, and the principles, and eventually the techniques, and we complexify over time so that people are eventually able to fight and do so much faster. So that's kind of where I'm at today. So this is kind of like the long story short of my progression as a martial artist so far. And thanks to that, I think the most important thing is I retained like 2 important lessons, which are, number one, never believe anything too much,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's something that unfortunately in martial arts especially is very common. You've seen it in your comments and viewers and in the industry in general. Like people like really cling on to the belief system of their style. And ultimately, I think that's detrimental for our progression as martial artists. Like we want to keep an open mind, and you always want to be willing to question your assumptions and your beliefs in order to keep on moving forward. It's basically the scientific method. And the second takeaway that I got from this whole experience and is everything can be improved. And that was the good thing that came from my experience in traditional martial arts and even in a cultish organization, is that coming out of it, I was questioning everything. And when I looked at MMA, I said, well, okay, like this is really cool. Like BJJ wrestling, powerful stuff. But why couldn't it be structured in differently and made more accessible for the average person? So that's was my inspiration for creating EMA. So I think those are valuable insights for your viewers. And yeah, so that's my long story short. And I hopefully by watching this interview, my goal is to kind of educate people. Maybe people, hardcore believers in Wing Chun, will not be convinced, right? Most likely, or maybe we'll plant the seed and eventually it'll germinate. But people who are maybe uncertain about the values of different martial arts, or are starting to question their martial arts, specifically Wing Chun, I want to go in detail into why I think it's suboptimal. So doesn't work, you could say. Doesn't work against better disciplines. It can work against people who have minimal training, but I don't think it is as good as modern combat sport methodology. And I will go in detail into why.
And I think from my end, what I saw, at least coming out of China, was that it really was that first Ip Man movie starring Donnie Yen that
Mm,
got a lot of people interested again into Wing Chun.
right.
I think because of Jet Li and Jackie Chan and stuff, people were more into the performance aspects of Kung Fu, so the wushu and stuff like that for a
Hmm.
long time. Because Bruce Lee unfortunately passed away so early in his life. And then so what happened in China was the Ip Man movie came out, and then this TV show called The Legend of Bruce Lee came out, which was
I didn't
a
see that
very
one.
badly written show, but it made Bruce Lee
Okay.
look like he was so amazing, and he had all these challenge matches and everything. People know about the Ip Man movies in the West, but they probably don't know about that TV show, The Legend of Bruce Lee. It starred that dude who really looks like Bruce Lee. He was in Stephen Chow's Shaolin Soccer, and he was the goalie, for those of you who remember that movie.
I
And
do.
so
Yeah, that was a
he
great
remember he
movie.
had a scene where he like looked like Bruce Lee after he blocked all the
Yeah.
shots. It was that guy. That guy played Bruce
Okay.
Lee in The
Nice.
Legend of Bruce Lee. But I was watching it and I was talking to some of my Chinese friends who are, more learned or who are not like super mythical about Kung Fu. And they're like, yeah, that TV show is just complete just making stuff up. There was a part where
Yeah.
he had a match against Chuck Norris in a karate tournament. He beats up Chuck
Mm,
Norris. I mean, he beat him up in the movies and stuff, but I don't think there was a
yeah.
publicly televised match that he had with Chuck Norris where he beats him up. So that's examples of stuff like that TV show made up. Just giving some context to viewers, because a lot of viewers are like, how did Wing Chun suddenly pop up on the map? It wasn't just the Ip Man movies.
Yeah, definitely. When was the first Ip Man movie? It was like early 2000s,
Yeah,
maybe?
early
Ish?
2000s, man. I remember because at that point, a lot of people in China, I think, especially in non-Southern China, had
Mm,
already kind of like not not forgotten, but like not known a lot about Wing Chun at that point. So
Mm.
that movie really sparked something. And the funny thing about Ip Man, the movie, was that Donnie Yen, he didn't even do Wing Chun when he made the first movie. He was more
Didn't
like
he?
just
No.
because he's an MMA guy, he's a Kung Fu guy, he was just doing the moves, but he actually wasn't even Wing Chun trained.
Well, he did move very Wing Chun-y like, right? He had it shows that he practiced. It
Yeah,
looked like Wing Chun,
yeah.
but obviously it's fight choreography, and you
Mm-hmm,
can make
mm-hmm,
anything look good,
mm-hmm.
especially for people who don't know. Like that's huge. I mean, for people who don't have any martial arts training, it's very easy to see a demonstration, and it looks good. It looks like it will work. If you don't understand the principles of timing and resistance, and like people typically they look at the guy doing the move, but you should look at the other guy when you see the demonstration, right? What's the other guy doing? He's just leaving his arm there. You know, like those terrible self-defense or Krav Maga demonstrations. Like it looks brutal, but yeah, on a guy who's not defending, anybody can devise a strategic plan to take candy from a baby, right? It's so easy. So I think there's a lot still of education to do in terms of the general population, in terms of what actually works in terms of martial arts techniques, principles, and practice methodologies. And hopefully this is kind of what we're gonna move forward in this interview.
Exactly. So, when you emailed me, you talked about there's potentially 7 fatal flaws in Wing Chun. So,
Mhm.
tell me about how you came up with 7. Why not 6 or why not 8, etc.
Well, you could structure it differently. I just kind of make it. I like to make lists. I like to organize information. That's kind of what I do. But I think like by organizing it like so, 7 fatal flaws or 7 like mistakes that Wing Chun is doing. Like it's wrong in those 7 ways. And that's why it doesn't perform as well on average than most other, or the most popular, I would say, combat sports methodologies, namely boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the disciplines that have proven to be effective time and time again in mixed martial arts competition. So that's it. Those 7 flaws. And I would like to go into like a few disclaimers first before we get into all that and the nitty gritty. But like common things that people say, right? One, every style is good, or like there's good to learn in every style to a certain extent. But we have to be able to have this open discussion and realize the fact that some are better than others, and we have to be able to speak about this unemotionally. Like it's no prejudice against Wing Chun practitioners. I mean, I was that guy. I did it for 10 years. So I'm not like insulting you because I think Wing Chun is suboptimal. It's normal to be charmed by that promise and want that to work. So it's not a personal attack on people, but we have to be able to speak objectively and say things as they are, and say, okay, this method is better than this method, and this is why. So hopefully this is what we're going to explore today. Another thing that people say often is like, it's not the style, it's the practitioner. Again, that's false. Like, yeah, a guy that's really, really good in one style, that the style is not as good, versus another one that's very poorly trained in a good style. Yeah, okay, you could, but on average, if you take a guy of the same weight, same strength, and same time of training, you can measure styles that way, right? So on average, we can see what works and what doesn't. And yeah, so also especially for people who are more ingrained and want to believe, another disclaimer is that I think it's helpful to dissociate ourselves from the things that we do, right? A lot of
Mm.
people have their identity wrapped up in the martial arts that they train. It's kind of like a religion,
Yeah.
right? And any attack or any criticism of that methodology or that style, they will take personally. And again, I want to say it's not a personal attack. It's just on average, objectively, this is what I've learned over my martial arts journey. So I say it respectfully, I say it objectively, and I think it is a mark of respect to say things as they are. I think some people avoid conflict, and that's probably one of the reasons why people say, oh, there's good in every style and it's not the style as a practitioner, is because they want to be nice, they don't want to attack people, they want to respect other martial artists, which is a fundamental value of martial arts. I think respect is super important. But that being said, it is respectful to speak with candor if it's done properly. So that's kind of like a little disclaimer. The other thing is, tied with the identity thing, being aware of the confirmation bias. right? I'm sure you've done some research on that. But like once we decide to believe one thing, it's very easy to only look for information that corroborates that belief
Mm-hmm.
and that proves that belief further, and to ignore everything else that's contrary. Again, as a habit, I encourage viewers to expressively look for ways to disprove what you believe. Look for contrary evidence. And if once you've looked and you've looked open-mindedly and exhaustively, you're still not able to disprove what you believe, then you have something pretty good going. But if you look at it objectively, again, you'll most likely, if you're doing it scientifically, you'll be able to disprove things that are not true. And that should be our goal, is to get to the truth. And yeah, lastly, it's I think we should, I think martial arts needs to be more scientific. It's less it should be less about labels, less about schools of thoughts, and like there's an expression in French that says guerre de clocher. I don't know if there's something similar in English, but like where like you have two towns and like they're always battling each other just because they're very similar, right? And I know in Wing Chun this is huge. Like people criticize one lineage and the other, right? Oh no, that's not real Wing Chun, or that's not the good Wing Chun, right? So let's make it less about labels and let's make it more about objective observation and the scientific method. So that's my quick disclaimers before we get into it. Make sense?
And I will 100% back you up on especially what you said about confirmation bias. If you take any course on research design, if you're going to design an experiment or something, right? The whole point is you have what's called a null hypothesis. So I'm getting very technical for viewers, but we have to explain this. So I'm going to explain it in another way. The null hypothesis is not this is it. I'm looking for evidence for it. The null hypothesis is this is not it. So you're looking for evidence to disprove your assertion. And the more evidence you have to not disprove your assertion, the more likely you are that whatever you were trying to prove is true, right? That's the mental switch you have to do. What is the norm is the norm. You're always trying to prove that whatever you think that's not the norm is right by seeing that there's a preponderance of evidence that the norm is not there. If that's a good way of explaining it. For viewers that didn't understand, just listen to what Patrick said before. But I'm trying to explain it to you from like a more statistical angle. You never say, okay, this leads to this. Now I'm gonna look for this. You're not looking for this. You're looking for not this. And if you don't get not this, so it is a double negative, but there's a reason for it. It's a statistical thing. So that's what I have to add on to what you said.
No, absolutely. It's exactly the method that you should adopt, and like it's important to be conscious, like, because they call it the confirmation bias, because it's an ingrained mechanism in our mind. Like our brain is made that way, where it's an energy conserving mechanism essentially. Once we decide something is true, or we think something is true, it's just less demanding in terms of willpower and mental energy to reconsider that truth. You just kind of stick with what you think you know, but it's a trap. And if you're not conscious of it, then you're much more likely to fall prey to that mechanism. So confirmation bias, look it up. But absolutely, very good point. And so shall we get into the 7 fatal flaws?
Yes, I'm very excited for a discussion. Tell me, please.
Awesome. So first off, no wrestling or grappling, right? That's you can't argue with that. There is no wrestling or wrestling defense in Wing Chun. Far as I know, there might be a style somewhere, some hidden branch or whatever that's really good at grappling and could beat the jiu-jitsu black belts, but I highly doubt it. Far as I know, it doesn't exist. And what's often said in Wing Chun circles or Wing Chun videos is that you don't need it. And I think that's wrong, right? You cannot, if you want to have a complete self-defense education and you want to be able to fight optimally, you must, at the very least, be able to defend takedowns. Like you see it in MMA, all good strikers have stellar takedown defense because you have to be able to stay on your feet, right? And it's not, like what's often said also in Wing Chun is that you don't need it because Wing Chun is so brutal and so direct that you will land your attack and you don't need to defend the takedowns. That's false. Again, we've seen it time and time again. Like if you're not defending the takedown and you're attacking instead, that's a tactical mistake. Maybe you land a shot, maybe you get lucky and knock the guy out on his way in, but the chances are very low. And we've seen it on average with most matches. It can happen, but it's very, very low percentage. What you should be doing when somebody shoots on you is defend the take. And then once you have mounted a defense, then you counter offense, either with striking or wrestling-based attacks or grappling-based attacks.
Yeah.
So that's number one. No wrestling or grappling whatsoever. I think that's a fatal flaw. I think you would agree with that. You've seen it many times in challenge matches as well.
Yeah. And I know some Wing Chun styles probably teach takedowns, but again,
Do they? Yeah.
having some takedowns is different than being a full grappling system, right?
Yeah.
So just because you can take someone down, a few takedowns that you see in other Kung Fu styles too, and then you have a few potential takedown defenses that mostly involve strikes and not leverage, I don't think that's considered full grappling. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and also like you see it all the times. Like there's some Wing Chun videos that like teach takedown defense. Have you seen these? But the guy shooting in like is not doing a takedown at all.
Exactly.
He's just basically like lying down on the ground next to the legs, and the guy does his little punches. So yeah, that just makes no sense. So it's not only about the techniques, like you said, maybe there's a few takedowns here, but it's about the practice methodology.
Yeah.
Right? You have to deal with actual wrestlers or wrestling trained people trying to take you down, not this random guy approximating a takedown and you make your techniques work with absolutely no resistance. That's just incorrect.
Yeah. And adding to this point, again, this is not just picking on Wing Chun. Like I've been to jiu-jitsu schools where their practice of single leg is not as good as the wrestlers, right?
Yeah.
I one of my biggest memories, I had a 12-year-old do a single leg on me, and his single leg was better than the single leg that most jiu-jitsu gyms have done on me. Yeah. So I can vouch for the fact that, every style has its specialty. And a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, I'm not saying all, a lot of jiu-jitsu schools aren't going to be as good as wrestling when teaching a single leg takedown. So again,
it's true.
On Wing Chun. This is a general discussion about teaching methodology and training methodology.
Exactly. But the difference I would say in BJJ specifically is they know that they don't specialize in wrestling.
Yeah.
Because they don't mind being on their back in general, right? And to a certain extent, like if you watch like Ryan Hall in MMA, like if your jiu-jitsu is that good, you don't really need wrestling that much, right? Because you could fight, you could be very like, people don't even want to engage him when he's on the ground.
Yeah.
So he doesn't mind being on his back, right? So to a certain level, you can compensate for one with the other.
100%.
But the main difference is that they're aware of their speciality. Like they're not going to claim that they're going to outstrike anyone with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But now Wing Chun people are claiming that they're out wrestling people with Wing Chun techniques, and that's just not the case, right? So we have to be aware of that. So that's it. No wrestling, no grappling. And furthermore, it's not that good for striking either. So that we're going to get into the next points and why that's the case. But the first fatal flaw is no wrestling and grappling. And I have a theory about that. I'm not sure if that's really the case and why that's the case. I think it's a cultural thing. I don't know, like in terms of the origins of Wing Chun in China and so on. What's your background, by the way?
I'm Chinese.
Chinese? You were born here though, or
I was born in China.
Yes? Born in China, cool.
Yeah, but I spent most of my time in the West, so I'm like 3/4 Western, 1/4 Chinese.
Okay, 1/4 makes sense. Well, you could maybe corroborate this in terms of the cultural aspect, and in the context in which Kung Fu was developed and Wing Chun specifically. I think there's kind of an unwritten rule where if you're in a fight and the guy falls down, you don't follow him. Like you don't roll on the ground with other people. You let him get up and you fight like a man. I think that's been my experience a little bit in the Chinese or Oriental culture, and that might explain one of the reasons why grappling and wrestling is not as present in Chinese martial arts systems. Would you agree?
So this is a tough one because the oldest documented Chinese martial art, it seems to be actually Shuijiao. So the Chinese wrestling system is the oldest documented system in their historical system. And that's why the Chinese Shuijiao, the ones where they wear the short sleeve jackets and stuff, that's why it's so good, because out of all the martial arts besides like Baji or probably Choi Li Fu, Tai Li Fu, I think Shuaijiao is actually the has the longest lineage. You can trace it probably thousands of years back.
Mm,
But what you said though, I think it's true, but I don't think it's just for the Chinese culture. I think it's for a lot of cultures
mm,
because you look at, for example, even sometimes you watch fights, street fights or something in
yeah,
America. The
yeah,
moment it goes down, people be like, "Oh, stand them up, stand them up, stand up." So I
yeah.
think I don't know what it is. It's like I think it comes with some kind of fighting culture, but yeah. You're getting at something that I haven't done much thought into, but I see where it's going, and maybe it has to do with like some kind of maybe like masculine culture or something like that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
So that might explain it, because I don't otherwise, or they just didn't think of it.
Hmm.
I don't know, but like it's in many cases it's really the right thing to do to take the fight to the ground. Like,
Hmm.
one, you got to have your defense for sure.
Hmm.
Like if somebody tries to get you, got to be able to defend that.
Yeah,
But in many cases, it really pays off to be able to control somebody on the ground.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's so if you don't want to create like lasting injuries, if you want to just control someone and then immobilize them, make them go unconscious, threaten joint break so that they can comply. Like there's and when there's significant size differences as well, it's my experience that it's easier to compensate for those size differences with grappling
hmm,
than striking or than wrestling
hmm,
in general,
yeah,
because if you have more knowledge and more skill, you can compensate more in that area. So it pays to know, not just defensively but offensively as well. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's been my
absolutely.
experience at least. So that's number one:
And
no wrestling
actually,
and grappling.
I'll
Yeah.
back you up on this too.
Hmm.
Shuaijiao and a lot of these wrestling systems are
Yeah.
very separated from the striking systems,
Yeah.
for my understanding too, right? So it's like, people from a young age, I knew about Shuaijiao, but you never associated Shuaijiao with like, oh yeah, I can do striking and Shuaijiao. It's like, oh, you do Shuaijiao, you're like a Shuaijiao person.
Right. Right.
So
They-
that
They're
in
not.
itself,
They're
it's like,
not
what is a
closely
fight,
akin.
right? Like, maybe in the minds of many cultures, a fight is like standing up, trading blows. It's not, oh, I grab and throw them. No, that's not a fight. That's just throwing.
That's like a game or
Yeah, that's
a
like a
sport.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or that's like for like lowly educated people or something. There must be some kind of
Mm,
other connotation.
that might be the case. Indeed. Yeah. Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that's the first, I think, mistake or flaw that Wing Chun has. If you want to be a complete fighter, you must learn wrestling and grappling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, moving on to the stand-up game. So, next fatal flaw number two, I would say, is the awkward stance. Right?
Yeah.
And I say this from experience because, like, were drilled to do it a certain way, where you'd have your weight. I'll demonstrate. So you have your weight on the back leg, right? So you're supposed to have your weight here on the back leg and your guard in front over here. So it looks a bit like this. Your feet are in line and all your weight is here, and you're supposed to be flat-footed. So when you move, you have always your heels on the ground, and they're supposed never to leave the ground for
Mm-hmm.
some reason, right? Which makes no sense, because if you're not lifting your heel, you're not engaging your calf, which you're foregoing about, I don't know, 40% of your leg power,
Yeah.
and you're diminishing your speed, your agility, your ability to change directions quickly, which is a huge advantage in striking. Like if you want to be a good striker, it's about being there when you want to land your attack, and then not being there when the guy attacks you.
Yeah.
But because of the stance and the way that it's structured, your mobility is severely affected.
Mm-hmm.
Your weight is on the back leg. So the optimal weight distribution obviously is 50-50. So you can go forward or backwards.
Yeah.
And there are cases when you want to put weight forward or more backwards. But in general, you want a 50-50. You want to stay on your toes, and you want to have what we call a fighting sway, or you want to be kind of always moving, right?
Yeah.
So that you can position yourself adequately to enter, create angles, retreat when it's appropriate. So
Yeah.
mobility is huge, and unfortunately, it does not exist really in Wing Chun.
Yeah.
Furthermore, there's no weight transfer either. So you're supposed to keep your weight on the back leg and then deliver power basically just from the shoulder, right? The Wing Chun punches, you're just kind of just on the center line over here. I still have the muscle memory. I did it too much, trying to forget it. But again, that's not the optimal way to throw a punch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just engaging essentially your arm, from your shoulder. Maybe you have a little bit of hips, but it's your reach and your power is severely affected. Like, look at the difference. Like, if you have, okay, so I want to throw a Wing Chun punch over here, boom, here, I'm moving a little bit of the hips here, but I'm not transferring here. Compare that to having my weight 50-50, and then, boom, fighting twist, putting the hips into it, and look at that difference in range. Boom, range and versus here, right? It's a no-brainer. You want to, reach is a huge advantage. That's why they measure it in MMA, right? He has a reach advantage. Reach advantage is important. So why wouldn't you maximize the reach that you have? And with reach and the distance of the movement that you create, there will come power. And that's just for straight punches. The swinging mechanics as well are really important for boxing and punching specifically. So if you're intentionally limiting your weight transfer and your hip movement, we call it a fighting twist, you're affecting your power, and that would be a mistake as well. So it's not to say that short range strikes don't have their place, although personally I don't really use them, but maybe a tight hook to the body when you're in a clinch, it can have its place. But why would you just ignore long range striking? It makes no sense. Right?
Yeah.
And
that goes with a very interesting criticism, which you're probably going to cover that soon, but I'm going to mention this anyways. A lot of Wing Chun doesn't even have hooks.
They don't even have hooks,
and they don't train against hooks. So
exactly,
like one of the things that Muay Thai has really taught me is that some of these Wing Chun blocks, you see them in FMA and stuff, actually work really well against hooks. Like, you can block a hook with your elbow. Like, so a lot of that Master Wong Jeet Kune Do stuff actually can work. But again, I don't think many Wing Chun guys are throwing any type of hook on each other. So you're not even understanding that the majority of people in this world, they don't know how to punch straight. They're going to throw haymakers.
Yeah, there's just like a wild punch, and there's no defense for it. Exactly. Yeah. And I was indeed going to get to that in later flaws, but it's absolutely the case. So if you're not, that's the other thing. If you're just practicing against Wing Chun people, you have kind of a limited sample and a limited set of techniques that you know how to defend against. And we see it all the time in those challenge matches. The guy is just not responding to the appropriate threat at that very moment. He's responding to something else entirely that's just not happening.
Yeah.
So we'll get to exactly what that is. But so hooks, absolutely. I've seen people say that there are hooks in Wing Chun, or why aren't there hooks in Wing Chun, whatever, they kind of insert hooks in it. But even then, they're kind of shy about it. Like they would just kind of do it like small, again, just with the arm. But again, it's about the whole body. You push off the leg, you turn your hips, you turn your shoulders, and then the arm swings after. So you have that maximum swinging power, right? And it's really important to be able to maximize power for your body weight and your body type. And then if it's appropriate, sometimes you can forego that power in order to accentuate speed, but you want to have the option to put maximum power.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will add also Qilala, for example, right?
Yeah.
Qilala, his hooks aren't even from Wing Chun. He even says it. His hooks are from Tongbei, right? Tongbei, there's a move like this. So he's kind of taking that mechanism from Tongbei and applying it to a hook, which works really well for him. But even he knows that, like, he had to add more to his Wing Chun. And of course, then that opens up the whole, but he's not real Wing Chun. Oh my God, but we're not going to go into that right now.
No, but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because so what?
Yeah.
Like, what's so wrong about adding different techniques?
Yeah.
And again, we come back to like the whole label and identity thing and believing in that method only and trying to be rigid about it, which I think is in nobody's interest, because you're just not you're limiting your progress if you're being closed-minded like so.
Yeah. And then the other thing I'll totally add on is that, so some Wing Chun people would say this. They would say, well, you know what, how we're practicing is not actually how we spar or how we fight. So when we spar, we're actually going to be more like this, or we're going to be more like this. So some of them might say that, but we also see many examples of Wing Chun people, when they're in a match, they're like this, right? So, you know, I get what some would say, but then you look at video evidence, you see exactly what instructor Patrick's talking about. It's like, I see people in matches, there's this like, their spine's kind of bowed forward and they're like this. So it doesn't seem like that's a common knowledge thing in Wing Chun, that you're not going to fight like this. It seems like there's still at least many schools or some schools that like they think you can actually fight like that, you know?
Yeah. And I was going to get to that too, but like, it's interesting you mentioned that, but what you said, like, okay, we're practicing like this, but that's not how we fight. I'm calling bullshit. Because under pressure, it's what you practice that will come out
Yeah.
100% of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You cannot help it. It's muscle memory.
Yeah.
If you don't practice a certain way, you will not be able to apply the techniques in a different way.
Yeah.
It's just not the way the body works and the brain works.
Yeah.
So you can't claim that it's just, no, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
No sense whatsoever. The other thing that we hear sometimes, oh, well, I've actually heard that. It's not made for combat sports. It's not made for somebody who actually knows how to fight. Well, why the fuck do you want to learn this then?
Yeah.
So, like, if it's made to fight just this average dude that doesn't know how to fight and is drunk in a bar, well, you don't need any martial arts training for that, right? You just maintain your distance and, I don't know, you can do whatever. The guy's drunk, right? It's like devising plans to take candy from a baby. What you want is to learn how to fight people that know how to fight. And then when you face that guy that's drunk, it'll be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Why would you train anything less than that?
Yeah. No, you mentioned something super good. And it's something let's definitely get into more of a discussion about, because exactly like you said, that's my philosophy too, right? That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, there's a reason I'm training to fight fighters, because if I can fight a fighter, then I think I should be able to take care of the random person who doesn't know how to fight, who messes with me. I'm not going to pretend I'm training to become a fighter. I'm not going to pretend I'm training to become a badass. I'm not going to pretend I'm training to become a master or a teacher. But I want to be able, if some MMA dude tries to like mess with me in a bathroom, I'll be able to hit him a few times.
You want to have a
defend
chance,
his
right?
takedown and run away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it's just common sense. Like, if you want to learn to fight, you want to be able to fight people that are skilled in fighting.
Yeah.
Like, it's like learning chess, but just playing against 5-year-old children.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
This makes no sense. So anyways, that's your awkward stance. So the awkward stance is number 2. And what that does is that it severely limits your mobility as well as your power.
Yeah.
So the stance, in my opinion, is incorrect, and the weight transfer and the lower body positioning, and then the mechanics of throwing strikes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to number 3, which is more on the defensive side. Chin exposure. I've heard you say time and time again in your breakdowns, why is this chin so high? Why is chin so high? Do you have you actually trained Wing Chun?
I've trained a few classes. I'm not going to pretend I know too much about Wing Chun, but I've seen a few lineages of Wing Chun people show me stuff. Right. And some have honestly impressed me more than others. But the chin exposure thing I haven't seen from the Wing Chun people that I've seen, that I've trained with, but I've had instructors send me stuff where they're literally like that.
Yeah.
And where does that come from? That comes from, you obviously haven't sparred, have you? Like, that seems to me where it comes from.
I have a theory about it. Could you guess though why that's the case?
My thought is, so I'm gonna turn sideways, okay?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
If you go like this, in your mind, you're farther away from the punches.
Yeah.
It comes from a flinch response that's not conditioned, where you realize, no, actually, this is better, and you're more protected. But because they haven't really sparred, it's like that, right? It's like, in middle school and they're doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's kind of like a modified version of that.
You hit the nail right on the head, and I can speak from experience. The reason why the chin is up and the head is so far back is because of the practice methodology. There's a lot of chi sao, right? So you start by making contact, and we'll get that more later. But then, and even the sparring is very chi sao-esque. So the goal is just to displace the guard and then somehow just touch the face. Right? So in order to practice safely, you're not actually like hitting 100%. You're controlling the strikes, but there's no even potential power in the strikes. You're just practicing. It's like a game of tag with the face, right? So what you want to do in that case is you want to not get touched. So if you were to place yourself like this, you would get touched on the forehead, which technically in a chi sao match would make you lose a point. Wow. But any good boxer knows that you can take a hit on the forehead.
Yeah.
It's okay. You won't get knocked out. Yeah. But you can't take it on the chin, at least not repeatedly.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's where that comes from, because you're not used to absorbing powerful strikes, and the practice methodology is all about touching the face, so you want to avoid that. That being said, like, I think makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, and to expand on that, I think safety in training is hugely important as well. So that's something we emphasize a lot with our students and in our approach. You don't want to get knocked out, and I think mentalities are changing now. Like before, like people like they said, oh, you got to spar hard if you want to be good. Yeah, no, like you want to avoid brain damage if you want to be good, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, so you want to practice controlling your strikes. Okay, so if I'm landing any jab, hook, whatever, I want to be able to stop my strikes at the surface, right? So I'm not actually hitting my partner, but I'm touching him.
Yeah.
Touch sparring.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do so at full extension and with no potential power. It's not just about just doing this. So you still want to do a full weight transfer, but you stop it at the last moment.
Yeah.
So there's still that potential power. There's still the visual timing. The person sees powerful strikes coming, but you're pulling your punches at the last moment, which ensures safety in training, but you're still practicing realistically. Right? Which I think is not the case in Wing Chun, because again, it's just all about touching. But even if you would to touch with 100% power, there's no potential power.
Yeah.
So you won't knock him out. Yeah, you touch the guy's face. Good for you. Right?
Yeah.
And then what? So yeah, that's my theory about chin exposure. And that would be a tactical mistake. Comes from the sticky hand drill. The other thing that's contributes to chin exposure is one, so you're not tucking your chin. You're not used to dealing with impacts on your forehead. The skull, by the way, is a very strong bone.
Yeah.
Right. It's made to protect your brain, so it's important, right? You're made to withstand impact. And plus, if you understand biomechanically, if you angle your head towards the strike, it redistributes the impact down your spine, and everything is like solid. It's like an arch, right, holding up a building.
Yeah.
So you can take a lot of power here, but if you're taking power here and then the top of the head goes this way, then it messes up your neck. So it's not good. So dealing with that oncoming power, so being able to absorb powerful strike that comes by hiding your chin, that's a good last resort. Obviously, you want to cover up if you can, but even if your hands are busy, you can tuck your chin and get a good strike on the forehead, and you'll be okay, most likely, unless you're dealing with a very heavyweight fighter, he can still knock you out.
Yeah.
But the other component of that is head movement. So there's no head movements in Wing Chun.
Yeah. Not that I know of, man.
Not that I know
of.
And it's closely tied also to the previous point about mobility, but it's also a different. You do want to move your up, down, side to side. You don't want to provide a stationary target and basically be a sitting duck for your opponent.
Yeah.
You want to be a moving target. So there's no head movements. That's another fatal flaw. And together, the head movements with just the chin position contributes to fatal chin exposure, which explains a lot of the knockouts that we see.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's so amazing that you talk about this because, you know, for the longest time, I was also kind of, because you see, I have a long neck, right? I have a long neck. So for me, when I get hit, it rocks me a little bit more. That's why I had to really, really strengthen my neck a lot. But
do you? Yeah. Do you do exercises for it?
Oh, I do a lot of neck exercise, man. I could go on and on about neck exercises, but I used to think.
I'm curious though. Can we do a parenthesis? What do you do for neck?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it, man. Let's talk about it. So, the most important neck exercise that zero people do, even jiu-jitsu people, most fighters don't even do, is called a chin retraction, also known as a chin tuck. It is not this, okay? See? It's backwards.
Yeah.
So most people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes, a chin retraction.
Nice.
You have to have strong. I was actually just talking about this with people. These muscles here, the muscle that attaches the neck to the back of the head, they're called
it's kind of like your upper traps,
muscles.
I guess.
Your suboccipital muscles attach your traps to the neck. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
If you don't have strong suboccipital muscles, what's gonna happen is these micro movements, like your head's gonna like wobble
head,
right? Yeah. So like when you get hit, for all viewers. I can go like 2 days about this. Look at fights. See what happens when someone gets hit. The first thing the head does, it tucks. Before you go this way or this way or this way or whatever, the first thing the head naturally does is it tucks. Look at a little kid when the little kid falls. The first thing the little kid does is he tucks his neck. It's natural. But most of us don't have these muscles strong anymore because we're at a computer
Right.
or we walk around like this on our phone. We forget that these are the essential muscles to uphold everything. It's these suboccipital muscles. So before you start doing any of the other neck strengthening exercises in jiu-jitsu, they do a lot of the flexion ones, like you're on the ground, right? And then you do this, you do the no, you do the maybe, stuff like that. Before you do any of that, you have to make sure your suboccipitals are strong.
Makes sense.
So it's like you see a lot of fighters even do this, boxers especially, right? They might have their chins down or something, but the chin's not tucked.
Right.
You get a layer of protection from the tuck. Before you flexion, if you
it
just
tightens everything, so it doesn't have anywhere to go. If there's strikes, it's already braced for impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
If you just flexion, see, you still move. If you tuck and flexion, it moves in a more controlled way. So it's the same. You tuck, it's more braced to absorb everything. Impact already.
Awesome. Right? I'm gonna add that to my routine. I just thought about it. So if you kind of
add resistance, exactly, you pull, Patrick. Like add in a little resistance, exactly.
Elastic bands or weights or pulleys or whatever.
The next step, exactly, Patrick. So you can go like this, like you said. You put something here and you tuck. I like to put a band. So you put a band here, give it some resistance.
Yeah. Nice. I'm gonna add that to my routine.
Yeah. Now the problem with this is that I'm putting some weight forward, right? So if I do this too much, I'm kind of like working out certain muscles. So like you see what I mean? Like I'm working out certain muscles back here.
Yeah.
So like
want to balance
that's why
it out
I
after.
actually usually take a band, I attach it to the door.
Yeah, and then you do forward,
and I do it that way. I don't
sideways.
Work these. See, I don't work these muscles as I'm tucking, right? Because I want to isolate them. I want to isolate the muscles.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you don't using your arms.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not using my arms because if I'm using my arms to pull, you see, I'm activating certain muscles, and it's
you're distributing the work.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I know there's these neck trainers you can use and all that. Personally, I do use my hands, like because I find you can adjust the resistance more as you get more tired. So I do like all angles. I do forward, 45, sideways, backwards, boom, all the angles and the nose. But like you resist with your hand here, or here, and like I find that you could get a really good workout with the neck. So actually, that's another. I just thought of another fatal flaw. Lack of strength and conditioning.
Yeah, 100%, man.
I didn't put that in the 7, so that's number 8 now. Lack of strength and conditioning. So bonus one, because again, the premise is that if your techniques are good enough, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Of course, right?
Bullshit.
I know.
Like strength and conditioning, dude. Like you need it. That's again why there's weight classes. So especially if you're not on the bigger side, well, you always at least want to maximize what you have, and make sure your body is strong. So for injury prevention, like the neck exercises, for the shoulders, for the lower back, for the hips, and just general strength as well. Like the strength and conditioning is huge. So that's another definitely super important one.
Yeah, exactly, man. I knew this would be a great conversation, man. Like we're going.
Hopefully, viewers are gonna get some value out of this.
Yeah.
Looking forward to reading the comments.
Yeah,
I'll share this on my feeds as well.
Absolutely.
So where does that bring us? So chin exposure, which is a tactical mistake. You don't want to expose your chin any more than you want to expose your chest in grappling. Let's say you want to keep your legs in between you and the other person that's having a guard. Next is number 4, overemphasis on center line. Right, so you've seen that. We talked about it briefly about the hooks, but assuming that like the theory and what you're told in Wing Chun circles that all the vital targets are on the human center line, which is not the case. Like temples, side of the chin, ribs on the side of the body, legs, like for the leg kicks, knees from the side, like there's all kinds of valuable targets on the side of the human body. Like why would you just attack the center? It just makes no sense. It's kind of like to a lesser degree what we saw in jiu-jitsu until recent years, where people were ignoring leg locks, right? I'm super happy, by the way, that IBJJF has like integrated now heel hooks in the higher divisions. That's going to change the game a lot.
Yeah.
And John Danaher was huge in bringing attention to that fact. Like he would train people for 2 years and they would beat black belts because they had no knowledge of leg locks. I think it's very similar, right? So it's a tactical mistake. Just ignore a huge part of the targets that are available to you.
Yeah.
Right. Even if to land a strike on the center line, it's good to create diversions on the side. Plus, they're valuable targets as well. So yeah. Hooks, round kicks, haymakers. Use round strikes. So that would be a mistake. So I'm sure you've seen it many times, right? Where the guy is just only protecting the center line and only attacking the center line, but is oblivious to everything that's coming from the side, and he's not making use of the weapons that are at his disposal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in general, even if you're not a trained fighter, you probably just know, okay, I'm gonna protect this area.
Yeah.
So it's like you're fighting. What people don't realize, okay, if I focus on attacking your center line, it's actually not as effective as you think, because by the third or fourth punch, if the guy's still standing, he knows, okay, yeah, it's not like your emphasis on attacking the center line is going to give you some advantage.
No, exactly. You're just limiting yourself.
Yeah.
Right. It's not. There's no. And plus, like you said, it's a learned response. Like instinctively, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And that brings me to an interesting point as well. Is and I've experienced this firsthand. I got into like challenge fights and like stuff like that. Although in Wing Chun you practice the center line, under pressure, a lot of times what you see when you really feel in danger and like really under the emotions, what comes out sometimes, more often than not, I would say, by having looked, is like poor quality boxing.
Yeah.
Because like you feel it, oh no, and then you just like do this awkward movement because you haven't practiced it. But again, your body tells you that this is what you should be doing right now.
Yeah.
This won't help you at all.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a learned response that is again incorrect.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
So again, no offense to any Wing Chun practitioners. It's just like, dude, you could do better. Like, why wouldn't you? So overemphasis on center line. Number 5 is a big one as well, is reaching for the hands. So that's the whole concept of the words, the bridge they call it in Wing Chun. Like you gotta get the bridge, or what's the word?
Yeah, they call
gap
it
the bridge, or
like finding the bridge.
Finding the bridge, exactly.
Is the word that they use. I've heard people say 寻桥, like finding the bridge.
Exactly. So you don't need to do that. It's not like you could. But it's not necessary at all. You can strike from afar without touching the guy's hands first.
Yeah.
You don't need to make contact with the hands.
Yeah.
So what you see most often than not is you got one guy in those challenge fights. You got one guy that's like boxing. He's keeping his guard close and he's ready to throw punches. And the Wing Chun guy is just looking for his hands. And then what happens is, since you're already overextended, there's no potential power in the strikes that you want to deliver. Plus, there's the fatal mistake of having the chin open. So now there's no guard on top of having the chin open. So the results are more often than not knockouts. So it's a mistake to reach for the hands. That's not to say like your strategy can't be to get into the clinch. That's perfectly good strategy. You want to protect yourself on the way in. Maybe you block a strike, you get your inside ties, biceps ties, or collar ties, and you work your clinch. That's a good strategy. But again, it goes both ways, where the guy's looking for the hands and only looking for the hands. They don't progress to collar ties. They don't go to clinch. They don't have the inside control. It's just about having forearm contact, which it only works in the rule set of if the other guy is doing the same, then okay, it's a game where you're trying to outmaneuver each other and try to get around the guys in order to touch finally the face, again with no potential power. But that, I would say, is a mistake as well, to try to always make contact with the hands. You don't need it.
Yeah. And from my talks with certain Wing Chun people, what they tell me is that some of this, like reaching for the hands, this chi sao stuff, this chin up thing, is a misunderstanding of applications to Wing Chun.
Okay.
But the chi sao and all of that stuff, according to some Wing Chun people, it's actually more for grappling. It's like the whole center line stuff. It's not necessarily like center line, like strike the center. It's more to like find someone's center of gravity. So from like a grappling context, like in jiu-jitsu, right? Like if you connect with their center, or they're connecting with your center, they're able to manipulate you more with leverage than if they're just trying to like crank at an arm or something like that, but not controlling your center.
You got to control.
So some people claim that it's actually like just a misunderstanding of grappling, Kung Fu grappling, that Wing Chun can actually be used for grappling, but they kind of apply it to striking, and that's why there's such oddness in some of the training methods and sparring methods. Again, that's just what some people say. I don't know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but honestly, I think it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a kind of a. It sounds like a justification. To me. Like okay, this clearly there's problems with this, and now we're trying to make up a reason why that's the case. I don't know, maybe in ancient times Wing Chun people were excellent grapplers, but what we've seen so far is nobody can stand a chance in a grappling or wrestling engagement with Wing Chun alone. It just doesn't happen. So again, I'm open to seeing evidence to the contrary, but I think you've seen enough fights to corroborate, right? So yeah,
and even the effective Wing Chun we've seen, it seems to be striking, right? I haven't seen much kind of effective grappling Wing Chun.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and then the ones who can do good in the striking range, usually they've practiced a lot, they've sparred a lot. Most often not, they've sparred against people from other styles as well, so they kind of figured out ways to go get around and then make up for the possible weaknesses of Wing Chun and learn to deal with these other attacks. But I think confusing the center line with center of gravity, again, a bit of a stretch. I don't see it honestly. But again, I don't know, maybe I'm open, but I wouldn't say so. So okay, reaching center line, reaching for the hands. The other thing also, so reaching for the hands, and then this is something that's, I think, another very important flaw, is leaving the hand there. Right? Why would you do that? This is like when we had forms in our style and whatnot, and what we were told was that it's to maximize the delivery of power, right? You contract all your muscles at the end and you get the power out of there, right? And you see it like the way people practice. In sticky hands contests, I think it's like to signify that a point has been won, where like you leave the hand there, hey, I got you, like I touched you, right? And then the person needs to react to that and reset and go back to their defenses. And in terms of katas, it's kind of to make it look nice. And karate does that as well. You know, they leave it here. It's to look good, I guess, to make a freeze frame, and so you can see the technique, I guess, in demonstrations. But again, that's a tactical mistake. You want to retract your punches.
Yeah.
Why would you leave them out there? Why would you leave your hand there? Only bad things can happen. That once the strike has been delivered, there's no threat. This hand poses absolutely no threat unless it's actually grabbing something and pursuing its attack. But if you just leave it there, it's completely useless to you. Plus, it can serve you as a defensive mechanism for the counter strike, which will come. And on top of that, it acts as a lever that the person can grab, and I'll use it to wrestle you or take you to the ground or break your arm entirely. So there's no advantage to leaving your arm there once you have struck. And that is a huge, huge mistake that Wing Chun people do. Make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Both leaving their hands out when they're like what we talked about already, and also just like leaving it out
after the strike. Like even if the strike lands, kind of, and then you just kind of leave it there. It's just,
and I think a lot of that goes back to what we're talking about kind of the lack of pressure testing, right?
Yeah.
Because
or pressure testing within the rule set.
Exactly. Or only pressure testing within the rule set. Because like you said, anyone that's sparred, the moment this happens, boom, you know, whatever.
Yeah, right? Boom, over the top, or just like an arm drag, you know, like.
Yeah, like I used to when I first started boxing. I would put my hands more here, right? Because I always thought, okay, the top of the gloves hit the chin, and then I start getting tagged up here. So now, you know, it's more at the temple. Because again, It's like you learn from getting hit a few times. Okay, oh, you gotta go a little higher. Also, if you don't put them up here, you get hit in the eye a lot, man. That sucks
Yeah,
too,
yeah, no,
right?
that
If you're
sucks.
peekabooing here, that's why you peekaboo here.
Especially those small gloves, or if
Yeah,
you're going to practice barehanded, you don't want to get struck in the orbital.
yeah,
That's that's
yeah.
not cool. But yeah, so you do learn by pressure testing. And by the way, like maybe some viewers might think that okay, well, I don't want to go up against a boxer, get head trauma. That's not my thing. The strikes don't need to be powerful. Like you don't
Yes.
need to get knocked out to learn. Like if you get touched here and the guy swings a hook, but he controls the power and just touches you, he lifts you up, you're gonna learn. You go, okay, no, that shouldn't happen. Okay, I better tuck my chin. I better block.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
block more powerfully. And once your defense makes more sense, maybe you can increase a little bit of power, so
yeah,
you have that experience of dealing with oncoming power, and then you can gauge your sense of distance a little bit better, work your head movements, and just be more effective against a realistic and skilled attack, not just the rule set of Wing Chun.
yeah.
So yeah,
And I'm not afraid to admit it. I'll be the first to admit it. Like a lot of times when I spar, I'm not sparring hard because I'll
no,
tell them, look, my technique isn't there yet. My reaction time isn't there. So tap me, tell me. I'm not afraid to tell people multiple times, yo, do you mind going softer? You don't have to like
I do the
decrease the speed, just
same.
going softer. Because again, it's all about learning. Sparring is not about getting head trauma, right?
No,
And I think unfortunately, there's a little bit of blame can be tossed on many sides of the equation, but I
mm.
think the combat sports people and the traditionalists all kind of misinterpret what sparring is, right?
Sometimes, yeah. I
Sparring
think
going
it's
super,
changing. The mindsets are evolving now.
yeah, yeah,
We're hearing more people make sense about it because,
hmm
if it's your career, like especially in professional fighters, like high-level professional fighters, they're very careful about safety
yeah,
because it's money on the line,
yeah,
right? If you get injured before a fight, boom, the fight drops. You're not getting paid.
yeah,
So it doesn't make sense to hurt yourself in training.
yeah,
Firaz Zahabi did a great video on that. It says he said, "Don't lose your chin in the gym."
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Because it's detrimental. It's not positive. Plus, like the average person, you don't want to go to work the next day with a black eye. You
yeah,
don't want to get knocked out and start forgetting stuff.
yeah,
You even from a purely martial arts standpoint for effectiveness, you're not improving as fast when you're injured.
yeah, yeah,
You're not learning as much, and people often mistake, like you said, pressure testing. People go both wrong in both ways,
yeah,
where either you don't do it or you do it in a very limited rule set where you don't actually have the experience of dealing with a realistic attack, or you don't spar at all, you don't drill, you just fight. And then in both cases, especially if you go too hard, too fast, you're not acquiring skill.
yeah,
You're just basically surviving. You're scared. You're using your flinch reflex, but you're not developing new patterns that'll serve you better in the future.
yes,
You're just getting hit,
yeah,
right? And there's no benefit to that. So this is a concept that we practice a lot with our students, and I try to emphasize it in the way that we teach. Is that we call it progressive resistance. So you want, when you're, let's say an example. I want to learn to do an armbar properly. Okay, so first you got your technique. Okay, where should I be positioned versus the other person? Okay, I want to do this. This is my braking mechanics. I bridge in the other, optimize the leverage on the elbow. Okay, this is how I do it. Once you're comfortable with the muscle memory, you want your partner to offer a little bit of resistance. They're trying to wiggle out a bit. Maybe they're trying to create a bit of space with the shoulder. Maybe they're trying to turn out a bit. And then they're forcing you to maintain your position. You got you tuck in your heels. You got to be tight in the position. You got to control the elbow, prevent the turnout. But they're only moving enough so that you're still able to control them, like you can catch up. And then you acquire skill. Then you're able to modify your technique so that it keeps on working. And as you get more comfortable, then the person increases until you're able to do the armbar against a fully resisting other skilled human being. But if you do another thing that's like a lot of, in my experience, jiu-jitsu schools, what they do is that they teach a technique. Okay, this is this. Okay, don't resist. Let your partner do it. And then boom, we roll. Well, how many times are you going to get to practice that armbar that you just drilled against no resistance in those 45 minutes of rolling? Probably not even once, because you can't even get there, right? And if you do, the person escapes right away. You didn't get that experience of dealing with the appropriate amount of resistance in order to build your skills. So I think that's huge. It's pressure testing with the appropriate level of resistance, progressive resistance, and the idea is to keep you in the sweet spot where you're challenged, but still successful. And as you progress, you increase the resistance.
Yeah, I'm
Is
so
that how
glad
that's how you
you're
train too, I
mentioning
guess, eh?
this, especially about jujitsu, because I think
Yeah.
they always say jujitsu's so hard initially, and I
Yeah.
honestly think a lot of it is from a
It doesn't need to
different
be.
angle, from a different angle than Wing Chun. It is a training problem. It is like a coaching
Yeah.
training problem.
Yeah. It's it's incorrect. It doesn't need to be that hard.
Yeah.
You don't need to get smashed for 6 months before you actually learn to retain guard or escape pins.
Yeah.
It's I think it's what's the word? It prevents a lot of people from training.
Yeah.
It discourages people. You don't want to. You want to build people's confidence. You want to build their skills. You want to get them stronger. Get them to learn what to do, and then resistance is great, but
Yeah.
too much is not useful
Yeah.
for the development of skill. And as martial artists, that's what we're all after, right? We want to
Yeah.
improve fast. We want to
Yeah.
improve ourselves. We want to, as coaches, we want to improve our students, our athletes. So we need to do so scientifically and optimally. And like you said, it could go wrong in both ways, either too little resistance or too much resistance. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, so true, man. Again, viewers watching, look, it's not just picking on Wing Chun. This is a talk about methodology and training and how to be better martial artists. I hope you're seeing this.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
And the other side of it, like for resistance, this is like this bothers me like really deeply. Is like the self-defense training, where the person does one thing and the other guy does like 15 moves. It's just like, I think you did a video. I got the guy like turning around the legs.
Yeah, he did like 52 moves.
That was like taken to the extreme. It's like, it's almost like a farce, but the guy's actually serious, right?
Yeah, he was serious, and like so many people defended him, man.
What? Like, how could you? I know, like, again, it's understandable maybe from a novice standpoint. If you don't have actual sparring training, you could, I guess, think that it works. It's more subtle maybe when it's like just 2-3 moves against one move. It's harder to see. But again, I encourage viewers, when you're watching a demonstration, look at the other guy.
Yeah.
Look at what the other guy is doing, and is he actually doing something, right? Because either he's just not doing anything and just getting hit, or he's exaggerating the response, where it's just a small strike and the guy goes flying away.
Yeah.
And in both cases, it's wrong, because it's not how you want to be training. You want to be training against, and even in demonstrations, you want to account for the reaction that you're going to meet with the other guy. So you do one thing, he's going to do something, and hopefully your technique is prepared to deal with the optimal reaction on his part. We come back to practicing and dealing with skilled opponents, which should be our objective as martial artists, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty much, so that brings us to the last point, which in my case is, I think it's the probably the most insidious aspect of Wing Chun, and that is closed-mindedness. And that is a flaw. That is a mistake. We go back full circle because we did touch on that at the beginning. But why would you limit yourself to one methodology, to one style, to one label? Why would you do that? There's no intrinsic. The only reason I would say is to conserve mental energy. That's the only thing, because it's hard to learn a new discipline. It's hard to have an open mind. It's hard to question your beliefs. So I think that's the only reason. It's basically a form of laziness.
Yeah.
And it's detrimental to you. It'll hinder your progress. And yeah, you're kind of stuck after that in a kind of a pattern of trying to fit the round peg in a square hole and try to make it work, and intentionally avoiding to learn what actually works and the evidence that's there. And just let it go, dude.
I think I'm gonna add I think 80% of it is laziness, like you said. The other 20%, I think, from a functionalist perspective, it probably does create community cohesion when you know exactly what the criteria is to fit into the group.
Yeah.
And then kind of build
okay. Yeah.
So it's like it is laziness, but it does create community cohesion, because I'm thinking about cults, or even like religions, right? Religions have a set of rules now, religions have their own thing. So I'm not going to drag religions into this, but you think about, like you said, it's tough to think too much, right? So if you have a set of rules and everyone can know those rules and adhere by them and kind of like build up a hierarchy or whatever in there,
Right.
it's an easy way to kind of build up a community. I mean,
True.
that's why, for example, even legit jujitsu schools often have like little customs and stuff like that, right? It's just ways to kind of get people on the same page, so that way they can feel like a little bit of a family.
True. You again, I hadn't even thought about that, so thanks for pointing that out. We talked at the beginning about confirmation bias, and that's like it's a mechanism that we have that it's an mental energy saving mechanism. But there's another bias, and there's a great video I watched on this. It's by, I don't know if you follow Joe Scott on YouTube.
Joe Scott, I do not.
I think it's Answers with Joe, the name of the channel, or maybe it's just Joe Scott. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But he makes these kind of educative and entertaining videos about many different topics. And one of his videos, recent videos, is cognitive biases.
Oh.
So are you looking it up right now?
Yeah, I'm looking at him right now. Joe Scott.
So Joe Scott, cognitive biases. You'll probably find it right away.
Dude, this guy's a popular channel. YouTube has just gotten so big, man. How do I not know of a channel that has this many subscribers?
I know, but there's so much good value on there. But anyways, that channel in particular, there's a whole video, and it's quite a substantial video just on cognitive biases. And that's the other one that I forget all the biases, but the one that you just mentioned, it's called in-group bias. Where because we're fundamentally social creatures, we're programmed to live in tribes and to function in small groups and then respond well to hierarchy and then authority and so on. We're programmed to want to belong and fit into certain groups. So we have a mental mechanism, which is to favor information that comes from within that group and discredit information that comes from the outside, or even people that are outside that group. So that's exactly what you said, is the in-group bias. So that makes a lot of sense. You're prone to believing that methodology more than anything else because of your intrinsic need to fit into the community that you've created around, in this case, Wing Chun, but it happens in any other community that can be created.
Wow.
So,
yeah, it's funny you saved the best one for the last, right? Because the flaw of Wing Chun, if we had to like reduce it down to one, really is just closed-mindedness. A lot of the other stuff stems from the closed-mindedness.
Exactly. Because you're gonna see the flaws if your mind is open, because you're gonna look at it objectively. So that's it kind of sums up everything. So
it's and I see it all the time. Not only the infighting. Also attacking the pioneers who want to improve on it, but also like let's say on some of my videos, I don't know if you've seen the ones where we kind of looked at Tansao and stuff like that. There were essays upon essays written about the application. And
you
I'm
mentioned that.
Doesn't it seem a little closed-minded if you're writing essays to justify something when it's not? It's supposed to be a beginner move. You shouldn't need an essay to understand it, right? That shows a confirmation bias going on. You're writing an essay to justify something that doesn't seem applicable as a beginner.
Because it's less costly in terms of mental energy to justify what you already believe than to actually see it from the other point of view. And it's really important to be conscious of those mechanisms that we have inside us, because if you're not, like, you don't even know what's going on, like you can't hope to compensate for it and actually move forward. So. Yeah, man. Hopefully your viewers got something out of this, and I know it's the hardcore true believers most likely will not be convinced, but maybe if you could just try to see one aspect of it, try to question one aspect, and if you can foster doubt in certain, eventually you can start progressively opening your mind. So, yeah.
I'll tell a story too. I had this Wing Chun guy, very talented Wing Chun guy. He doesn't want me to tell what school he belongs to or what kind of Wing Chun he trains, but very talented guy. And when he met up with me, this was in 2019, he wanted to show me some of his Wing Chun system that he learned from one of his shifus. And you can tell there was this like cult-like thing going on. Like he was looking around. Everything he said, he was like trying to tell me in secret, because
like secret methodology.
We're sitting in like a public place, right? Again, I don't know him. He's just a dude
Right.
who I met one time. I was ice skating. He saw me. He's like, dude, I want to show you some Wing Chun because I love your channel. So I was like, I met him once. He seemed cool. So like, I met him again in a public place. Again, I'm not taking too many risks, right? So in the public place, he's like really whispering to me. And then he's like, okay, I want to show you some stuff. And then he's like looking around. He's like, we go into the back of the mall, into the trash area so no one can see. And he's like showing me some Wing Chun. Yeah, he has some good Wing Chun stuff, but it's like, the reason I'm telling this story is like, you got to get over yourself a little bit. Your stuff is not that special.
Yeah.
It's not that special. Basically, a lot of its Wing Chun stuff looked like JKD, but with boxing. It was kind of like a better boxing version of JKD. I'm like, I see a lot of boxers kind of, you could almost say certain boxers almost do JKD, like Lomachenko traps and stuff like that. There's a lot of boxers that
you can do hand trapping,
things, right?
yeah.
So it's
not
like,
wrong.
your stuff is not special. Part of the reason why you think it's special because you're so close-minded. You don't watch enough boxing. You don't watch enough MMA. You don't watch enough silat or whatever to see that there's a lot of trapping in boxing. There's a lot of like blocking with your elbows, and there's a lot of weird angles that people do that you might not learn in your first week or first month of boxing, right? It's not special to you, but the way he acted like it was so amazing. It was so like innovative.
The word you're looking for is mysticism.
Yeah, mysticism.
That's another problem. the mysticism. The way I was brought up in the Wing Chun organization I was part of is like you said, there was these levels of secrecy that we hope to attain, right? Well, like if you're a good enough disciple, if you do what you're supposed to, eventually you're gonna get taught like the secret methodology, the secret knowledge. And to a certain extent, I think like even like very high level like jiu-jitsu practitioners, for instance, they don't necessarily teach like their real A game to everyone. Like there's a certain level of restraint when people are teaching, right? Because they're competitors, they want to. But that being said, like it's subtleties in the application. It's not magical stuff, and then everything needs to be out in the open, and we need to be able to discuss things and comment on actual physical techniques. It's not about woo-woo stuff and chi energy and all that, right?
Yeah, and I'll bring up something very quickly about what you said about kind of like not sharing your biggest secrets. Here's the thing. If it's your biggest secret, what it means is you just put more work into it, right? So even if you share it with people, chances are they can't pull it off. I can speak from experience from my YouTubing. Like, I share my secrets all the time with everyone, and nobody I shared with has like gone on to really implement it as well as I do. It's not because like I know more, just like I have more practice doing it. I have more discipline doing it. So I'm trying to tell the story, not to say I'm good at YouTube. My channel's like medium size. It's not even in the millions. But what I'm trying to tell you guys is, like, just because you think like someone's going to take it and do better, it's usually in your own ego talking.
Right.
Like, what you've accomplished, honestly, in all the grand scheme of things, is not that impressive. Like, that's what I have to remind myself every day. What I've accomplished every day, it's not that impressive. That's why you keep growing. So don't, like, cling on to stuff thinking, oh, my God, that's the only thing. That's my lifeblood. No, you keep building. Keep building. So you give away your secrets to other people. They get to your level, but by that time they get to your level, you have more secrets, right? Isn't that what life is?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree 100%. And there's two like kind of schools of thought in that area. Like some people are very generous with their techniques and they teach everything they know. That's my case. I try to help people as much as possible. Again, I don't know everything, but every time I learn something, I'm anxious to share it. I want to, because I'm excited about it. Some people are a little bit more reserved. Maybe when there's more at stake and they're like kind of a high level competition or whatnot. But again, I think that, like you said, the more you give, the more you get. And growth mindset, innovation, moving forward is super important. I think we should all we're all striving for the same thing, right? We all want to improve. Essentially, that's in all areas: martial arts, life, business, YouTube. That's what we're after. So yeah, might as well help each other. Win-win.
And then the other thing about the mysticism. So this Wing Chun guy, the same Wing Chun guy I was telling the story about, he went over all the mythology, the folklore about how Ip Man was not this, and the Wing Chun actually came from this, and all these religious things, and man, he knew his folklore. And I'm not saying maybe he's right, I don't know, but
the history,
he really knew the history, like, and it's counter to what's accepted of what most people think about Wing Chun. So like talking about the woo and the mysticism and all that, like, it's cool to like try to like tell people what you know about the history and the folklore and stuff, but how much do you want to I'm not going to judge and say waste, but how much time do you want to spend on that versus actually spreading your art or testing your art or growing as your art instead of like,
Yeah.
yeah, these schools, because, they're not this, you know what I mean? It just, if
Yeah.
you
No.
seem to have spent a
Yeah.
lot of time really thinking about that stuff, academic stuff doesn't make a difference.
That's super interesting that you point that out, and that's the whole kind of mentality of lineage. And the thing is, like, none of that is documented. It's just I don't know. It's wishful thinking, or it's indoctrination in certain cases. It's like stories that are just made up in order to get students invested and to believe in the method and to believe in the exclusivity of the method. And that's a cult mechanism. It's made to cultivate the us versus them mentality. And when you believe that you're in the in group and the only group that has the answer and that has the access to the truth, you're much more inclined to invest yourself in that group, which benefits the leader, and you're limiting your growth at the same time because you're not considering information that's from the outside. So that's also super insidious. I was exposed to that as well coming up. Yeah.
So Patrick, I think one thing that I could see you doing is like having another channel that's more
Mm,
focused on psychology and just like analyzing different things from like a psychology preference. Like look at different cults, look at different
right.
groups and break down kind of interesting psychological phenomenon you see. If you do that, I think I would be one of your first subscribers. I really like how you think because you
Thanks.
speak from experience. You've been in a cult and everything and you kind of you took good lessons out of that, and I can
Yeah.
see you really kind of like building on this.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thank you very much. I think I might do that in the future, or I might touch on this in effective martial arts. I think it's really interesting to understand like human psychology, and then a very interesting book that I read recently and I review it sometimes is Evolutionary Psychology. Have you read it? It's kind of like a textbook. It's like a big. It's number one on Tai Lopez's book club.
Oh,
Number
okay.
one, Evolutionary Psychology,
Hmm.
and it's really important. It is really interesting. It explains like why we think the way we do based on how we evolved
Uh,
as a species. So there's all kinds of mechanisms that so in-group bias, the deference to authority, all that bunch of stuff on evolution and reproduction. It's super important, super interesting.
uh,
So
wow. Okay. I'm gonna look this up. There's
yeah.
quite a few books now on evolutionary psychology, but I remember when I went to college, it was
Mm,
just starting to emerge, and I
right.
remember
But
it
it's
like,
one book. It's like I think it's David Buss, I think.
oh, David. Okay, this one. I see it.
Yeah. It's
There's
it's like
another one
evolutionary
that came
psychology.
out by Lance Workman. That's why. That's like
Okay, I
I'm
might
looking
check it
on
out.
Amazon right now. The one by Bus is number 2.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, cool. But yeah, I still got so much work to do on effective martial arts, so I'm not ready to start a new channel yet.
mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting to understand really like all those inner workings of the human mind because we're
Mhm.
we're, we're not logical creatures, man. Like, but far from it. Like we're so like social and emotional that we need to be aware of that. And hopefully, like my goal essentially with effective martial arts is like to make the martial arts feel a little bit more logical and scientific. And then one of the ways to do that is to be conscious of our biases and then look at it objectively and try to innovate in the space, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will definitely put this book in my. I have like a little Amazon list. I'm gonna put this in
You
my
do? Okay,
list.
cool. Nice.
Yeah, because
Yeah, let me
yeah,
know.
we could do a whole discussion about evolutionary psychology, man. I,
For
I I
sure.
had friends who in college we would talk about this for hours. Yeah, it
Oh,
like
it's
you said,
fascinating stuff.
there's so many things that you think aren't innate in how we think, but it is. And
Yeah,
the first step is to recognize it.
exactly. Yeah. Like a quick example, just to entertain, the perception of height. Did you know that when you're on bottom and looking up, you see a distance you estimate it as shorter as when you're up and looking down?
Ooh.
That's a survival mechanism because people that didn't have that mechanism were probably more prone to falling from heights. So over time, selective natural selection made it so that people that perceived distances as bigger from higher up were favored in terms of survival, and we were left with this mechanism
Wow.
because of that.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah.
thinking from that angle, for example, back in the old days, let's say you misjudged looking down, right? You're more likely to fall, etc. So you
Yeah.
misjudged the distance. Let's say you had to jump across something.
Yeah.
So this survival mechanism basically made it so the people who, when they look down, let's say across a canyon, they're thinking
Hmm.
about jumping, but they perceive it as a little bit more the distance
Deeper. Yeah.
deeper. They're not going to jump because they're like, ugh.
Exactly.
And so less chance of them breaking a leg or killing themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's a false perception. Like
Yeah.
it's not actually true. Like you see it as higher than it is, but it's a mechanism that favors survival. Thus, we kept it, and on average, people perceive heights as higher from the top than from bottom.
Which then, from a sparring angle or from a combat sports angle, it's interesting. So if you're sparring someone taller, how would you use that to their disadvantage, right? I'm going to start thinking about that.
I'm not sure how that applies for fighting,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, there's definitely a whole bunch of psychological mechanism in terms of intimidation and just like all kinds of psychological phenomena that are into play definitely when you spar for sure and
Yeah.
fight. So yeah, it's interesting to look at it from that standpoint as well.
Wow.
But yeah,
You know, Patrick, I think this might be a potential next conversation. We can talk about the psychology behind like training or psychology of a fight or psychology of sparring. That might be
sure.
really cool.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
we talked briefly via email, I'm looking forward to doing a collab on our channel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just breaking down kind of the more infamous Kung Fu versus MMA matches, because I know I've been speaking about it on my channel, but I've never featured other matches with commentary. So it'd be interesting. And any other idea, you'd always be welcome. I'd be happy to host you on EMA.
Exactly. So for viewers, once this comes out, I'll be on Patrick's channel too. So you guys will
Awesome.
be ready for that.
There we go. Any other questions or anything I can add or bring
I
to your
think
viewers before we wrap this up?
this is a really good stopping point, and there's been a very annoying noise outside. So I apologize to Patrick. I apologize to any viewers who are hearing this noise right now. But it's been almost going on this whole talk. So I think that noise is a signal that Patrick and I next time should talk in the afternoon because I try to
Okay,
schedule
sure.
in the morning because like nothing, you know. But then it looks like there's always something weird going on outside in the morning. So it's an incentive for me to sleep in late too. But I've actually
There we
become
go.
a morning person now. So
You
you know
have, yeah?
what? Yeah, I've become a morning.
100% night owl over here, man.
Yeah.
I love the
Okay.
night. Hate
So
mornings.
so next time we'll talk in the nighttime or something like that. I'll use this light and we'll illuminate my face and it'll
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe
yeah.
like we can wrap it up. I'll do a little quick recap for people too long didn't watch.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do a quick recap of the whole conversation. So the 7 fatal flaws of Wing Chun. Number 1 would be no wrestling or grappling, which is a tactical mistake or it's a flaw on the defensive side because you do want to be able to stay on your feet if you need to do so, and offensively as well because it pays off to be able to take the fight to the ground when you need to, and there's a lot of advantages to being able to do so. So jiu-jitsu, wrestling, you got to have some of that. Number 2 fatal flaw is awkward stance, which severely limits your mobility, so your ability to cut angles, create distance, as well as your power generation. So weight transfer, hip, shoulder movements, for throwing mechanics, as well as for swinging mechanics. So the stance, being flat-footed, not engaging the calves, limits your power and your mobility. Then you got chin exposure. So number 3 is chin exposure. So having your chin up, which like we talked about is because of the chi sao game where the goal is to just touch each other. So by having your face far away, you're limiting the chances to be touched. But from a fighting perspective, it pays off to tuck your chin and maybe expose your forehead, but you can get hit on the forehead and you won't most likely get knocked out unless the strike is very powerful, which is not the case with your chin. So chin exposure. What's closely akin to that is no head movement. So if you're going to have your chin up, well, you better at least be able to move, which is not the case with most Wing Chun methods that I've explored. We touched on the bonus point as well of lack of strength and conditioning. We talked about the neck, and you do want to strengthen your neck so that if you do get hit, you have somewhat of a resistance that can offer with your muscle strength and the rest of your body as well. You do want to be strong. It's a myth to think that techniques alone can save you. Your tool is your body. You want it to be strong. You want it to be agile. You want it to be fast. You want it to be flexible. You want to have good endurance. Like you gotta condition your body. So that's 3.5. Let's say the bonus point. Number 4 is overemphasis on center line. Which why would you just attack the center line? It's just like only using leg kicks, like not using punches or not using uppercuts. So why would you do that? You're limiting your arsenal. Plus, you're not learning to deal with the oncoming threat of attacks in that direction, right? So center line. Number 5 would be reaching for the hands. So assuming that you need to make contact with the forearms first before you land an attack, which is not true. You can strike from a distance, and defensively as well. When strikes are coming at you with speed and power, you don't want to be reaching for the hands. You want to be covering up. You see that all the time in Wing Chun. The chin is up, they're reaching, and then they're wide open, boom, knockout. So don't assume it's trap. There's a place for trapping, but it's a tool in your arsenal. It can't be the only one. Number 6 is leaving the hand there. Like we said in Chisao matches, is probably to signify that a point has been won. So, hey, I touched you, okay. In forms or kata is to kind of show the pose, and in Wing Chun it's more like this here, to show the technique so that everybody can see it. But in fighting, it's a mistake because you don't want to leave your hand there. It's not useful to you, and it's even compromising your defense and allowing openings and leverage for the other person to grab or to land attacks. So leaving the hand there is a mistake. And to wrap it all up, the last fatal flaw is closed-mindedness, like we said, which is due in big part to the confirmation bias. Once you choose to believe something, it's easy to just believe that and ignore evidence to the contrary. And the other point that you pointed out, which I hadn't seen, but it's absolutely true, is the in-group bias, which, because you're part of a Wing Chun community, you're part of a Wing Chun school, you want to be accepted in that group, you have incentive to only believe and preach the methodology of Wing Chun. And if you're aware of that cognitive bias, you can progress a lot further. So to sum it up, I would say to any Wing Chun people or people, any style, don't tie your identity to your style. Just be an open mind. You're a human. You're not a Wing Chun person. You're a human, and take all the tools at your disposal. Learn from everywhere. Learn from everything, and just try to be the best martial artist you can be and the best person you can be. I think that's the main takeaway from this talk.
Absolutely. And a thing that I personally am working on too is like exactly what Patrick said. Don't tie your identity to one or two things, right? That's so important.
Yeah,
And that's
it's
I'm
so
trying to
easy
do
too.
that too. I'm trying to, my identity a lot of times is the guy who makes videos, right? So I'm trying to do more.
YouTuber, yeah,
Yeah, I want to do more. Like,
yeah,
so I'm actively, especially in 2021, working on stuff. There's some stuff I'm developing that I'll let viewers know soon, certain
nice,
PPE products and stuff like that. So that's
cool,
something, some teasers for the future. But there's other things I want to be, right? The more you don't tie your identity to one thing, the more you're not going to be prone to all these fatal flaws, these biases that we've been talking about during this conversation.
absolutely. I mean, I think there's a place for like focusing single-mindedly on an objective when you have one, but again, like you said, it can't be your whole identity, and then you can't ignore information that's outside of your little bubble because you're just limiting your growth. Like, you could be a lot more. So, like, yeah, look at things objectively. So that's it. Thanks a lot for having me. It was an amazing talk. I was happy to share information with your viewers.
Yeah, and for viewers, this is why I got Patrick on, man. I really enjoyed his talk with Ruckus. I knew he was a very smart dude. So,
Thanks.
Patrick, the honor and the pleasure was all mine, man. Thank you.
Awesome, and all the best. And like I said, viewers, look out for the collab video coming soon enough, hopefully, with Jerry from Fight Commentary Breakdowns.
That's right. This was Patrick from Effective Martial Arts.